Hi everyone. So welcome to the Passion Animator Talk Show. So today we have a very special guest who is the head of character animation at DreamWorks in California. So I had been really fortunate and blessed to call him for the show and discuss about animation and share his wisdom on animation. So let's welcome Benjamin Willis.
Hello there.
Hello.
Hey,
Finally,
Naresh. Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you too. First of all, thank you so much for taking out your time, and it's been quite a while. I've been chasing you.
Yes. I'm sorry. Sorry, it's been a little bit, but we worked it out.
So how you
Yes.
doing?
Good. Yeah, we finished Bad Guys, obviously, it was last year or so. And then I was able to, I'm currently head of animation on Trolls 3, which is supposed to come out next year. So that's exciting. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
How you started your animation career and what are the projects you have worked on? And maybe you can share some insights on how you do the animation. Like I have been working as an animator in India,
Yeah.
but I still think that there is a lot of things to learn and how you guys think. What is your approach of doing the feature films? And
Yeah.
because there is a difference of quality for the feature film, and if you talk about the web series or maybe some daily shows, so the quality wise difference is there.
Hmm.
So, like, it would be really great if you could share how you do the this thing and what
Yeah.
do you look out into those kind of projects, like for taking out that good quality of work.
Absolutely. So I know you asked a couple of questions there. Why don't I can quickly start with my background, if you'd like,
Absolutely.
about how I got into the industry. I was very lucky. I grew up, going to museums with my mom. Like she always encouraged us to go to art museums, my brothers and sister and myself. And my mom, I would always bring my like little notebook and I'd go and I'd draw like sculptures or paintings or so I always kind of grew up just drawing a little bit. Every once in a while I would draw like little cartoon characters and that sort of thing. But it really wasn't until it was more of like a hobby and just kind of like for fun and nothing really like I like my wife, grew up a painter and she was much more serious. Like she was taking, art classes and all that kind of stuff. I never took any like art classes or anything like that. I was just kind of having fun. But when I went to high school, I remember, at least here in the United States, when you're in high school, once you reach about junior or senior year in high school, or like your last year, you meet with your guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor goes like, what do you want to do, for the rest of your life? Like, what would you like to do for a career? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Um, so she kind of like put a piece of paper in front of me, and it just had a list of all the possible like majors that I could study, whether it was business or accounting or chemistry or, science. And,
Yeah.
but the one that said art, I was like, that was the only one that I said maybe to. Like, I was like, I don't want to be an accountant. I don't want to be a chemist. My parents were chemists, which is cool, but it wasn't really for me. I mean, I like chemistry just fine, but not to like for full-time study. But art was the only thing that I said maybe to. And my guidance counselor gave me this giant booklet that said the Savannah College of Art and Design, which is down in Georgia. And I looked at the pamphlet and I was like, this looks really cool. This looks really fun. And my poor parents, since I had never really taken a formal art class, were like, all right, well, if you want to go to that school, let's give it a try for like a semester or a year. You know what I mean? Like, let's just see how you do, see if you even like it. I had a lot of really cool people that were there. SCAD has a lot of equipment. Like it was an expensive school to go to, which was difficult, but they had all the like latest computers. They had like a render farm, all this kind of stuff. So I was able to go through the program there and make a few short films, student short films, which is great. But then after school, I applied to like all the major studios, like, Pixar, and at the time Rhythm and Hughes when it was still going, DreamWorks and Disney. And unfortunately, I either got rejected or I didn't hear much back from them. I tried to get into the Pixar internship, but I wasn't able to make it. I think I was on one of the final rounds, but I didn't quite make it. But I then got a job offer from someone who used to work at SCAD or used to go to SCAD, so an alumni. And it was to work on a short film in New York City on this thing called One Rat Short. It was a short film about these two rats from the city that fall in love. It's kind of realistic, sort of. But what was interesting to me is that when I was first applying for jobs, there were a few opportunities I had at some game companies. But I realized that at those game companies, they were either doing motion capture or they were doing games that I wasn't really all that like interested in, that didn't really seem to have a lot of character. And I was like, as much as possible, I knew I wanted to try to get into feature film. So I was like, I'm going to try to, as much as possible, like work in a job that will do like hand keyed animation. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to continue to do hand keyed animation. And so I went to this place called Charlex, which is a commercial company in New York City. And I worked on a short film there. I met someone there there were a couple of people there who actually had worked at DreamWorks before. By the end of the project that I was on, one of the guys was like, hey, you know, I like your work and I like what you're doing. And let me send your work over to my buddy who's still working at DreamWorks. And so I was like, oh, that'd be great. Yeah. And so they sent my work over, and thankfully his buddy liked my work. And then DreamWorks interviewed me for this. It's a program called Outreach Program. We don't have that program anymore. I think we just recently had an apprentice program, which I think we're going to be doing every year, which is really, really great. So for people who are just out of school, you know, they'll be able to apply and get trained at DreamWorks, that sort of thing. But this was kind of like the old school version of it. And it was, this was about 16 years ago, actually almost to the day, because I think I started around this time, 16 years ago at DreamWorks.
You had this thing earlier, quite earlier, like when you were a kid. At that point of time, you realize that, okay, yes, animation is something I want to do.
Yes. I would say like for instance, when I was at school, that was my first time doing any 3D animation, because I didn't have access to that software really, or like I didn't have any computers that could do that. I did a little bit of 2D animation when I first started, but there was one night where because like what would typically happen is students would be in the computer lab. Like late at night, right? You're working on your projects, you're animating, you're eating your McDonald's or whatever, and just, and I don't find myself to be like a particularly like romantic person, but this one night in particular, I had modeled, do you know the Tasmanian Devil from Looney Tunes? I had modeled him in 3D, and I was animating him dancing to Michael Jackson's song, Billie Jean. Something about doing that, I just fell in love. You know what I mean? I was kind of like seeing this character come to life because I had made them come to life. It is, isn't it? Like,
when you do for the first time, it's like, wow.
Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of how I felt, where I was like, I feel like I could do this for the rest of my life. If you know what I mean? Like I felt like, you know what I mean? Like I know life changes and things happen, but at the time I was like, I think I really, really like this. And I think this is what I want to do. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to get picked up at DreamWorks, and the outreach program, just to let you know, it was like a 6 months where I would sort of be trained, but also I would actually work on production shots. Like I would actually get really like, there's smaller shots, shots that aren't like as important, but that makes sense because you're like learning and you're getting better, but you don't have any quota expectations for the first 6 months. So it's really just a chance for you to work on production shots and hone your skills and get better. And thankfully they liked my work, and and I've been at DreamWorks ever since.
Is it the same way like in California as well, in United States as well, in terms of animation, if we talk about as a career? So is it like people don't need graduation or so, like only you can learn animation and start working?
Right. Yeah. Here, I mean, at least in my experience, I did get a degree. I mean, I ended up finishing school, but like I have some of the most talented people I work with never finished college. Like they never actually got a degree. I think especially in the artistic field, you know what I mean? And it really is like, if your reel is good, and it looks good, and you're not a jerk, like that's all you really need. You don't technically need the degree. I think the degree is nice in terms of, getting experience, meeting with people, working with people at school, but it's definitely not needed, to get a job in this field.
I backed off from the education thing and got into animation.
Awesome. Yeah. So did you not finish a degree? Have you?
Yeah, I was into mechanical engineering. So
wow, nice.
So 1 year I did, and then I found out like this is not something for me. So
Yeah.
I should find out something else.
Yeah.
Then because I was really fortunate that one of my friend met me, and he was doing already animation. So he told me
Cool.
that let's just come into the institute and just have a look around what it is and how it is. And then
Cool.
I found out like interesting by looking at the brochure and everything, and the
Yeah.
institute app also. So I felt like I should do this. And then later on, I figured out that okay, yes, animation is something like I get more connected to, like acting and those kind of.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. There are, there are other people, like I said, that I work with kind of have a sort of similar story where they were like doing something else, you know what I mean? And they were like, I don't know if I like this quite as much. And they kind of stumbled into animation, or they had a friend, or they saw something and they were like, ooh, that looks kind of interesting. And I feel very fortunate, because I know sometimes for some people it takes a lot longer to get into feature. And
Yes, yes,
if
absolutely.
yeah, and even if you like, and that's not even a guarantee that you will get into feature. So I know I'm very, very blessed and lucky, for that. But I think even if I wasn't in feature, I would still be animating somewhere. You know what I mean? As
Yeah.
long as someone hired me, I would still be animating,
Yeah.
somewhere.
I had a word with Prashant as well. Like, is he
Yes.
from the your uh, DreamWorks place?
Yes, yes, yeah. Prashant and I, he's awesome. First of all, he's a really great guy, and but second, his animation is just outstanding. We worked together on a few things, but primarily we worked pretty close on Trolls World Tour together. He did some really, and we worked together on Bad Guys.
He
I
is
don't
a
know. He's
nice
just
guy.
he's the best.
Yeah.
He's the best. Both him and there are actually a number of different Indian animators, like Prashant, and then Ravi. I don't know if you know Ravi Campbell.
Prashant, like I had discussed few things with Prashant as well. Like on as I'm talking to you, the very
Yeah,
first person was Prashant. So he
yeah, yeah,
got connected to me like you are doing something good
yeah.
because he knows that what is happening in India. So most of the students don't have the clarity as well. Like
Sure.
but nobody is there to actually guide them that what exactly is this animation field, how you can make career from it. So it
Yeah,
is one thing is just somebody is telling you, okay, come and join the animation. You don't know anything, and
yeah,
you just spend your time, money, effort, and then after the graduation or whatever you are learning about animation, and then
yeah,
you realize that this is not the thing for you.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it is very much important. I feel like it is very much important to guide them in the right direction that this is
yeah,
something like this, and you should figure it out at the very beginning
yeah.
that whether you are suitable for this artistic personality or this career
Right,
or not.
right, right. I think that's great. That you're because like here in the United States, we definitely have a good number of resources, for animation and whatnot, and especially in India, it sounds like it's harder to come by, maybe teachers or resources that you can use. I know the internet is really great and really powerful, and it's getting even better. So, it's really great that you're doing what you can to educate people, because I think and like you said, give them a chance to see if it's something that they like, or if it's
Yeah.
something that they're good at, because it's if you're good at it and you enjoy it, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I started on Kung Fu Panda. That was my first film. Some Madagascar films. I worked on a Shrek film, Rise of the Guardians, and all the almost everything Trolls wise. I've worked on as well, and then yeah, most recently Bad Guys. I've just been very, very fortunate. There was one small little story was when I was working on Shrek 4. Sometimes you're working in animation, there are deadlines and there are certain pressures, to be like, all right, you gotta make it look good, but then you have to hit this deadline and all this kind of stuff. And so you can get very focused on like, oh, I gotta get this done and I gotta make this look good and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes you can forget a little bit of the fun.
Mm.
And there was this one time where there's this character Gingy in the Shrek universe, and the little gingerbread man. And I animated this shot where Gingy had a lollipop that was like it was like broken, so it looked like a spear, and then he was fighting these animal crackers that were coming out of these boxes. And so he's like this gladiator in the middle of this ring, fighting off all these animal crackers. And I remember sitting down being like, wait, maybe this animal cracker comes out like this. And then he tries to attack him, but Gingy spins with the thing over his head. And then what if he like impales this one? Like he sticks him and then he like twists off his head. And I was sitting there like stressing about like the choreography. And then I was like, wait, I'm like just thinking about how ridiculous it was what I was trying to animate and how like fun it was. Like my job is to animate an anthropomorphic like gingerbread man killing these animal crackers. You know what I mean? So it was one of those moments where I was like, all right, this is a pretty cool job. That's like the problems I have to solve.
How do you actually start it? Like, suppose you are given a certain kind of shots, and how do you plan out those shots?
For me, I'm really big into planning. So yes, I like the planning phase, the beginning of the shots. I probably spend a little bit more time there than maybe most people do, especially when you're like when you're really excited to animate something. You know, you want to jump into the scene and start setting keys and making poses and that sort of thing. For the most part, usually with like a typical shot at DreamWorks, you know, it really depends on just how much action there is in the shot and that sort of thing. But most of my shots, I'll say it's like an acting shot where like two characters are talking to each other. Usually what I'll do, the first step is, you know, obviously you get a launch from the director and ask the director, like, you know, what the intent of the shot is and what the characters are feeling. And is there any specific action that they need to have happen in the shot, whether it's like a character gives another character something or a character has to do a gesture or something like that. They might have specifics like that. So you get all that down. And then the very next thing I do is I just book like an hour or two in our reference room. So at DreamWorks, we have a reference room it's got some props in it, and but it's a nice big open space with a giant mirror and you know, just a camera and a monitor set up. And I just turn the camera on. And a lot of times what I'll do is, especially if there's dialogue, I will play the scene on loop in the background so I can hear the audio, and I'll just stand in front of the camera and I'll just try different takes. You know what I mean? Like I'll try what my initial thought is. I might try a slight variation on that initial thought. Sometimes I'll try something that's a lot different than what I was initially thinking, you know, just so I don't stick to the original idea that I had. Just maybe I can find something interesting. And I shoot, like I said, I shoot for like an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to my desk and I'll like review all the reference and I'll pick out what like my favorite takes. And usually my guide for picking out my favorite takes is like I'll try to see like, do I like believe my performance? Like, do I believe, you know, how I'm acting this out? And I try to use that as like my like guiding star, instead of looking at it just in terms of like, well, that's an interesting action, or that has some interesting timing, or that has some interesting posing. I mean, I am looking at those things as well. But for me, I care most about making sure that the performance is believable. And so I'll pick out one or a couple of takes that I think are most believable. Sometimes I'll look at my reference and realize none of it works. You know what I mean? And so then I go book, you know, another hour or so, and I'll go back into the reference room.
A lot of time planning and taking the shots.
Yeah. And so I try to find the best takes. Now, if the shot has a little bit more action in it, like say it's a character running across a rooftop and jumping and landing on something, most of the time there I might thumbnail out something quickly. Okay. Or sometimes what I'll do, I did this shot one time in Rise of the Guardians where Jack Frost he's just gotten his powers where he's learned how to like fly on the wind. But he's still new at it, right? So he's not very good at it. And there's this shot where he floats down to the city and then kind of crash lands. But the shot where he floats down, I wanted it to feel like he was a leaf on a wind, you know, sort of thing. And there was no way to shoot reference of me, you know what I mean, like floating. But what I ended up doing is I actually took my hand and I pretended my hand was Jack, you know, like floating. And I actually filmed my hand kind of doing these actions and floating around and until I found like a cadence and a rhythm that I sort of liked. And I actually filmed that. And so for Jack floating down, that was just my hand, you know what I mean, like shooting reference to that. And then what's funny, when Jack crash lands and like he lands on the ground, there was this video on, you know, on YouTube, there are these like fail compilations, you know, like people,
Yes.
yeah. There was this one where there was this guy who was like he was doing like a ninja audition or something like that, but he ended up hitting his head and then he like stumbled and fell out of frame.
Hmm.
And I was like, I want to do exactly that. So I actually took that reference and used that reference for Jack stumbling, in the frame. So sometimes it's not just me. Sometimes it's reference that I find online. Sometimes, like I said, it's just my hand, waving. It really depends on what it is that I feel like I need. And I find that whether it's the timing or the posing or the spacing but for me, like I said, I usually lean more towards I want something that feels believable, whether that's believable timing and weight shifts or it's believable acting choices. And then from there, I will make it look prettier in the animation, if that makes sense. So it's like I want to make sure my acting is working. And then from there, I try to make it look prettier. Because I find if I'm shooting reference and I have the idea in mind that I really want nice, clean poses, I might be thinking too much about trying to make a nice pose as I'm shooting my
Yeah,
reference,
yeah, there happens sometimes. You
Yeah.
think
And you
too
don't
much
think about the
about,
acting.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's usually how I start.
But
Like I will
how,
thumbnail from time to time, but not a ton. What were you gonna say?
like, how do you, like, some shots we cannot shoot, some
Yeah.
acting or some things cannot be shot as a reference. So
Yeah.
for that kind of shots, like, how do you take some reference, or what do you do for those kind of shots?
Yeah. Well, for instance, if I don't feel like I can act it out, sometimes I'll have friends that I know that I think would be a better fit. So for instance, like Poppy in Trolls. There were some female animators at DreamWorks that I thought brought this like quality to like how they moved that was much more feminine that I just couldn't do, or like I just couldn't naturally act out. And so a lot of times I would ask my friends and I would shoot some reference of them, doing a specific action, or I would just ask for them to do their version of something. And what I would do is either take their take or I would take parts of their take, or kind of maybe like what you were mentioning. If I can think of a movie scene or a different
Like,
actor that had done a particular scene, I'll go find reference for that and try to
action
take the
shots.
essence of it.
If I talk about action shots, then
Mhm.
like we cannot do action shots as a reference. Some of the
Right.
actions we can't do it.
Yeah.
So what about that? I'm asking like that kind
Yeah.
of shots, which generally people won't be able to act out or shoot the reference for.
Yep. So sometimes for that, so for instance, in Bad Guys, we did some very like stylized action. And for a lot of that stylized action, um, I just watched as much reference as I could, whether it was other animated films. I mean, if there are some parts of the action that I feel like I can just quickly do like a little bit of a movement to help like just kind of quickly see what I think the mechanics might be like, even though it's not the same exact action, I can get a little bit of an idea. I'll maybe shoot a little bit of a reference of myself, but most of it is just watching reference of either other animations, or if I'm animating a creature, right? Like I'm going to watch as much reference of that creature as I
Yeah.
can. I think that's why animators like, I don't know how it is for you. I imagine it's probably sort of similar, but do you do a lot of people watching? You know what I mean? Like when you go out and you'll kind of like watch people and see how they're like acting or how they're
Yeah.
gesturing and that sort of thing. Um, it's kind of similar where it's like I just try to watch and absorb as much as I can. Sometimes I'll quite literally pause an animation and go like, I want to take that pose, from the animation, or I'll watch enough like the first film that I worked on, where it was One Rat Short, the first short film that I'd worked on. Since we were animating rats, I could never really act out like a rat. I couldn't. I just didn't have the ability, and also I couldn't force a rat to do what I wanted him to do.
Yeah.
But I would grab as much rat reference as I could, especially reference that was more closely pertaining to what it is that I wanted to do in the shot. And I would kind of cut all that together and just study it. You know what I mean?
A
And
lot of planning. That
yeah,
must be like lot of planning. The
yeah.
time you get
And I
like,
would say, I would say for animators, sorry, I think I just cut you off. I'll just say real quickly that that's something that I encourage students to do, or whenever I talk to people, is just become, a student of, life and of acting and of storytelling and of motion and of, like it, you don't always know when you're going to draw that inspiration, but the more you absorb of the world around you, you'll be surprised. You'll be working on a shot and you'll be like, oh, I think the weight should be over here, or actually I think the arm should come up like this, and you might not remember where that came from, but it's sitting there, it's living there. It's because, yeah, it's because you're right, there are a lot of times, especially in animation, we're doing something that's either never been seen, or we're animating a character that doesn't actually exist.
Yes.
Like for How to Train Your Dragon, when we were animating, those dragons, obviously people had animated dragons before, which was great to see. We had a bunch of reference from from Harry Potter that we watched. We watched some like dinosaur series. We also had a bunch of videos of cranes that would fly, or different types of birds like hummingbirds, crows, and eagles. And, we'd watch how all these different birds would fly, or bats, especially, right? Because like bats sort of have those similar type of dragon-like wings, and we would break down the actual mechanics of those wings and that sort of thing. And so that when we worked on the dragons, we would kind of go like, all right, we have an idea of we don't want them to flap unless it's the Gronkle. Like the Gronkle is much more like a hummingbird because he's got the small little wings. And so we watched how like a hummingbird or a butterfly will fly. So we use that concept for them. But like Toothless, the shape of the wing and how it like came down and pulled back up, it was very much based on a mix of like a bat and some bigger birds like cranes or albatrosses or eagles, how they would flap their wings. It was like a cross between the two of them, but you can see how, I think in the end, you can create something that's, even though dragons don't exist, you can create something that is somewhat believable, for you'd buy that a dragon did that. But yeah, it requires a lot of work and study.
You look quite young, but though you have a lot of experience.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I don't feel like I look young, but maybe the camera is helping. Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky again to, work at a place like DreamWorks where there's so much experience there and so much knowledge and some really incredible artists. And so, and no one person knows everything,
Yes.
so it's like, so like, like for instance, with Prashanth, like Prashanth is much better at making things more entertaining and pushing shapes and pushing timings than I am. So, a lot of times I would watch his work or I'd pick his brain about like, how can I get that? Like, what's the phrase? It's good artists borrow, but great ones steal. And so like, I would just, I would steal like little tricks that Prashanth would do, but then I would, then there are other people like JP Sands, who was the head of animation on Bad Guys. Like he also was really good at entertaining choices and that sort of thing. And I'd be like, oh, I like the timing on that. Like when the character says maybe, and when he opens up his mouth after the M shape, I'm like, he just pops to an open mouth. And I'm like, you can do that. And I was like, all right. And then so I'll steal that idea, from him. And so I was very fortunate to have a lot of people who had a lot of good experience, who were very good at different things than me, where I could start to take from, inspiration.
So when you do the lip sync part, so like, do you do it with the acting, or do you start it earlier before the acting?
What do you mean? Like, do I, like when I'm first animating? Do I
Yeah,
start
like lip sync, do you create the basic shapes first, or you do it gradually while animating?
And maybe this would be a good, we can get even more in depth in this. Like if we ever wanted to chat again, I could probably try to find more reference in things. But typically for me, I won't, lip sync will be one of the later things I'll do. So for me, usually I'm trying to get the performance in through the body, and a lot of times like the mask, like with the brows and the eyes and that sort of thing, I will try to get all of like eye directions and blinks and expressions up here and body language I'll usually do first. And sometimes actually depending upon how much time I have, when I show blocking to the directors, a lot of times I won't even have any animation on the mouth, with the exception of just basic expressions. You know what I mean? So like they might smile, like if they're happy, I might put a slight smile on their face because that'll help sell the idea. Usually I'll like, sometimes for blocking, I don't even show lip sync. Like I have nothing necessarily on the mouth. It'll just be about the rest of the body trying to sell the action.
I feel it really difficult to convey the message with very minimum amount of animation. Like when the character is standing still or there is nothing happening, but still to convey the message, that is, I feel, the most difficult part.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe if that, like for instance, in a case like that, we're saying maybe there wasn't a lot of, I mean, even then, a lot of times I still don't do lip sync for the blocking pass. Now that I think about it. But if there is minimal animation on the body, and then I feel like I can focus, I have more time to then maybe focus on the mouth, you know, yeah, maybe then in that case, I would add some lip sync, because then that can actually give you some of the feel. You know what I mean? That you might be missing if the character is just kind of animating, standing there. I think I have sort of like a hybrid style of how I animate, in the sense that I don't very often use stepped animation. So like I know a lot of animators will set their key poses and their breakdowns and that sort of thing, and they'll keep it on stepped and they'll time things out that way. Sometimes I do that. If an action is very complicated, where there's a lot of limbs moving and there's a lot of things that are happening, I might do it in stepped in that case, because that way it's easier to visualize what's going on, or it's easier to like rough it out quicker, you know. Almost always I kind of spline straight ahead from my reference. So a lot of times what I'll do is, say I have a character, say it's like a medium shot and the character's walking across the screen. I'll start with the body node, and I'll get my reference first. I'll get my reference timed up the way I want it to. So like if I need to speed up some of my reference or slow it down, like I'll get it all timed up, and then I'll go, okay, cool. This is what I want to have happen. And then I'll almost kind of copy my reference. So like I'll take the body walking from left to right. I'll animate the body going from left to right in the timing that I want. So I'll set a key at the beginning, and then I'll set a key at the end. I might set a key for like an ease in and an ease out, but I'll kind of I'll set more of the extremes. And then same with the ups and downs. Like I'll set the extremes of like when the body's up and when the body's down, and I'll work my way up to the shoulders, and I'll do some motion with the shoulders. And again, with the head, I'll rotate it and move it, and same with the neck. And then I'll do the legs as well. So the legs are kind of following. So I'll work my way out. And then with the arms, because there are more joints in the arms, I'll usually key all the joints in the arm together for different arm poses. So again, it's kind of like this is like how I would block stuff out, you know, initially. But I do try to keep it to main controls. So it's like, usually it's like the main body, and then it's like the main shoulder. I got the neck, the head, the arms, and then like the legs, you know, sort of thing. So like I'll try to keep it to as few controls as possible. And like I said, I'll kind of follow the reference. And then what I'll do is I'll open up the eyes. So if I want to start doing the face, I'll open up the eyes and just keep them wide open. And I'll do a whole pass where I do eye direction. And usually with the eye direction, that most of the time I'll follow almost exactly the way the reference has it, because I find that with body mechanics, you know, we are a certain size and the character we're animating is a certain size. So we don't always match up 1-to-1. So with the body mechanics, I'm usually playing a lot more with the timing of that, like speeding something up and slowing something down. But with like the face, I find that a lot of times I can keep that more 1-to-1 with what I have in the reference. You know what I mean? The timing of the eyes and the darts and that sort of thing. Like that, I can usually follow my reference for. Again, I always adjust timing and spacing, right? You always like, you know, move things around, but that's usually a little bit closer to my reference. And then I'll do a pass with the blinks. So once I get the eye direction going, I'll do a pass with the blinks. Again, a lot of times I'll be following my reference. Sometimes I blink. I notice I blink too much in my reference. So sometimes I'll take out blinks, you know, but I'll just set the blinks. And then the very next pass is a pass on the brows and the eye shapes. And I'll do a whole pass with the brows and the eye shapes. And then the very last part, kind of what I had mentioned before, I'll put a general emotion on the mouth, like a little smile or a frown, or, you know, if there are main key poses with the mouth, I'll kind of just set those. But at least there from the very beginning, I feel like I have a really good I've interpreted my reference that I thought my reference was believable and good. So I was like, all right, if I can get that performance into my animation, which is that first phase where I'm trying to just get the essence of what it is that I did in there. And then that's usually what I'll show for blocking. So a lot of times you'll see, like I said, no mouth moving, but you'll see the eyes and the blinks and all that stuff and the body, working.
So taking it like one by one, doing
Mhm.
it the torso and then doing the chest and doing the eyes
Yeah.
and then the mouth. So for the whole shot, you do it like one specific thing at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I try to limit it to as few controls as I can because, I might input everything and say, since I'm following my reference so closely, it might start to feel a little bit motion capture-y if I followed it too closely. So then what I'll do is, because I kept the keys just to the extremes and I kept them on just a few controls, I can still select those keys and shift and adjust timings, really quickly and easily. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And like I said, again, that's for the blocking pass. So I'm trying to keep things simple. You know what I mean? So that I'm not dealing with thousands of curves at once. You know what I mean?
That creates a lot of confusion later on.
Yeah, because exactly. And I think the problem for me is that with like stepped is that a lot of times I would set a key on everything in stepped. And so right off the bat, I'd be like, I've got a ton of keys all over the place. And I think what every animator probably hates is that when you convert from stepped to spline, it's just a mess. You know what I mean? It's like, you're like, wait, my timing isn't as good as I thought. Now I got all these curves everywhere. And for me, trying to start splined, but using fewer controls helps me kind of like skip past that step, which is painful. You know what I mean? And what I'll do is, if a director for some reason doesn't like a certain part of my animation, then what I can do is I'll select all the keys that I've set keys on, and I'll just kind of do what maybe a lot of other people do. I'll just key everything that I've got a key on at one place, and then key everything that I've got a key on just for that place. Again, it's not keying everything on the body. It's only the curves that I had already animated. And then I can delete that whole section. I'll go back to the reference room and reshoot reference for that middle portion, and then once I find what I like, then I start the process over again, where that in between part, I'm just taking those, those simple curves. So for me, it helps keep things simple and minimal, especially at the beginning,
More about the deadline as well.
Yeah.
If there are too short deadlines you're working on, then it is difficult to shoot it like so much or get into that much of detail.
Yeah. I think especially I was finding that the better I planned up front, I realized I was spending a lot of my time initially. I was spending a lot of my time adjusting revisions that the directors had, right? Where the director's like, could you change this? Could you adjust that? Could you fix this? And so like I'd keep showing that I'd have to fix something, and I keep showing that I have to fix something. And I realized I was spending a lot of time there. And what I realized is that if I planned better at the beginning and my idea was clearer from the front, then the directors had a much better idea of what it is that I was going for. And either they liked it, or because they knew that they knew exactly where I was going, they could give me better notes. You know what I mean? Because later on, if I wasn't very clear, they'd be giving me different notes, trying to, yeah. So I found it helped me overall to just have a better idea and a clearer idea up front. And then I could just spend the rest of the time, like if the directors like that, I could spend the rest of the time making it look pretty. You know what I mean? I could spend the rest of the time pushing my poses a little bit and fixing up my timing. And
what kind of most number of corrections you get, or there are people making those kind of mistakes, like in terms of timing or in terms of acting, or
I feel like I've honed it pretty well. I'll say knock on wood, I don't usually get a ton of corrections. I get my corrections up front, like they'll see my animation and they'll go, I think they need to be a little bit happier here. Or I think they need to be, could you bring the character a little bit lower on this part or something like that? And what I'll do is, I can fix that up front.
Technical correction, but as far as the animation point of view, delivering the feeling or the emotion, that is what you are saying.
Yeah. Most of the time, the discussions we have with directors are the like emotional ones, you know. We do have rounds within our animation department where we'll get more into mechanics and specifics, you know, with supervisors or heads of animation and that sort of thing. So, but usually our conversations with the directors are more emotional kinds of conversations. Or if it ever gets technical, it only gets technical in the sense of like, I need you to get the character over here sooner. You know what I mean? Rather than it's never really like, could you add a little bit more overlap? Could you add a little bit more, you know, squash and stretch? I mean, sometimes maybe like if the director is more of an animator, you know, was an animator
Yes.
before, maybe they'll give those notes, but yeah, not as much.
Maybe if you would like to share some of your work or give some insights on those kind of shots, if you would like to share the screen and show some of your shots.
Yeah, if you'd like, I can, let me see here. The only shot that I have available is one that I had shared with you, was that the first shot of the, of bad guys. Would you like me to share some of that?
Yes, yes,
I'm not used to Zoom here. Oh yeah, share screen. That would be the button. Here we go. Cool. Are you able to see?
yes, yes.
Okay, cool. So maybe what I'll do is I'll put this on mute. And I'll just kind of talk through it here quickly. So you can see in this shot, what happened over here on the left is I shot reference for this shot. So I only animated Wolf for this shot, to be clear. That's why I kind of covered up Snake on the left. So for me, what I'll initially do is just do a bunch of different reference takes. Like this take you're seeing here is kind of like one continuous take, because
Yes.
I ended up getting one take that I loved. Like I was like, I think for the most part, this works really, really well. But you'll start to notice certain things that are kind of interesting. Like, so right here, you'll see there's a deviation where, as I'm stepping through it, Wolf has an initial reaction right here, right? Where he blinks and he changes his expression, where he's like, what? You know, to show like a little bit of thought. If you notice in my reference, I don't have that.
Yes.
This is something that like Pierre had asked for. He's like, I like this reaction. You know what I mean? He likes this reaction that I did with Wolf, where he's like air. But he's like, I feel like I want to see a little bit more thought before, like I like a pre-reaction to this reaction. So, you know, this was one of those cases where Pierre had asked me to, you know, to do this little bit where he's like, what? You know, before he has the bigger one. But you can see here, a lot of my timing is actually pretty close. Like if you see the hands moving,
Yes.
now some things I changed. So like on this, can you see my cursor? I don't know if
Yes. Yes. Yes.
okay. So like this hand that's on the table, like if I look at the reference, both hands are coming off the table at the same time. But over here on this one, I kept the hand on the table just a little bit longer. So you get a little bit more of a separation between the two hands, you know, a little bit asymmetry. So that's the kind of thing where, and you can see here with the head turning, like I made the head turning a little bit bigger for Wolf and I made it a little bit sooner. So that's the kind of thing where you put in your reference, and I'm using a lot of the timing, but you know, you put it in initially, but then you kind of shift it to, you know, to a place where it feels a little bit better to you, or it fits the character, you know, a little bit better. Let's just see if we play through here. So little things like this, like, so you don't really see it on the side of the screen, but Snake goes up into the air up here and he's like breathing. So in my reference here, I didn't know that Snake was going to do something like that. So like, I don't even have him look up, but you can see it with Wolf, I had to like track, you know, that Snake looked up. Also, we added this kind of like, again, this wasn't in my reference, but we added this like smile expression, because part of this idea was that, you know, Wolf is kind of teasing Snake. You know what I mean? So like, even though he's like air and he's acting incredulous, you know, he's not really serious about it. He's just more like, just trying to get a rise out of Snake. So this is one of those cases where I was like, oh, maybe we can sneak in a little bit of a smile with Wolf, you know, in this moment, to show that he's enjoying like teasing his friend, you know. Let me see as I play through here. So for instance, here again, you can see in my initial reference, like I don't have this actual diner You know what I mean? So like what you were saying, like I don't actually have those props, like that table or that chair to set up. So in my reference, I'm rotating in my chair, but so I had to supplement it and add, this is kind of embarrassing, but you can see me in my pajamas. But I had to shoot the reference for like the mechanics of this, you know what I mean? Like because I didn't have it in my initial reference. So I used it kind of to see like what timing would the leg come down, and then how would an arm come up and rest on my knee, and this is one of those cases where you're using like a mix of reference. So it's like I needed to get the physicality from this bottom one, but I'm still using the acting timing of the top one that I really liked. So sometimes that's what I'll do when I'm shooting references. Don't worry necessarily about always getting the physicality right in your reference. Like I care most about trying to get the performance right. You know what I mean? Is it a believable performance? So like this top bit of reference, I love the performance in there. So again, you can see that I'm kind of matching. Well, I wanted to do this little jacket thing, but I just didn't have time to get that little jacket adjust. But you can see I'm now getting the timing with the acting on my reference on the top left and putting it into Wolf there. And again, you can see the timing. It's still pretty close,
Yes.
to my reference.
Really close.
There are some tweaks and adjustments, but you can see here that I had to add in, again, I didn't know. So Min Hong is an amazing animator. He animated Snake. And so we were trying to act back and forth to each other. And what was interesting was, so here when Snake comes forward, I had to add like a little bit of a reaction to Wolf. Again, it was a note from the director where they wanted to see a little bit more thought in Wolf before he had his bigger reaction there, when he backs up. So those little things that are added. Also in this shot, what's interesting is having this sort of back and forth. So if I rewind just a little bit, what we had to do is that to have the two characters acting back and forth to each other, you'll notice Wolf stays still for almost this entire time while, like after he finishes his line, he's speaking, Snake is still, and then he stops and then Snake speaks, and Wolf kind of holds still, and then Wolf acts up. So we're doing this kind of like balance back and forth, right? Where one character will get a little bit more still while the other's active, and then vice versa. So that was something that we had to kind of like work back and forth with each other on. So again, here you can see he stops speaking and Wolf almost goes completely still, just sort of watching and listening, You see as we go forward. And so what was interesting in this as well, like, so I have Wolf. We had to try to figure out, since it's a very long shot, you have to figure out like, how can we create interest, like visual interest? And it felt like it wasn't going to be very interesting if the characters were just literally sitting across the table from each other the whole time. So we wanted to introduce this idea that Wolf and Snake are not only comfortable with each other, but they're comfortable with their environment. You know what I mean? They feel like they've been here before. You want to feel like that they're familiar with this place. So I came up with this idea, obviously, that Wolf, adjusts his seat and kind of goes to relax, right? But then at the same time, I realized at a certain point, I got to get him back sitting across the table from Snake. Thankfully, there was a part in the line where, because Wolf is teasing Snake, there was a part in the line where Wolf, like here, where he goes like, so you're saying you can taste air? And then I have an opportunity there for him to move back to this side of the couch, because now it's like he really wants to tease Snake. And it's much funnier if he can come back and face him face to face. But it also gave me an excuse to then move him back to the side of the table, which was cool and very fortunate. Also, this idea came in late where Wolf looks out the window, because sometimes it can be easy in animation to feel like the whole world is just what you're seeing here on screen. But sometimes it's helpful to have a character look off screen or look away to give you an indication of like what's to come. So like, I think Pierre or JP had this idea of like, wouldn't it be great if Wolf looks out the window. The audience doesn't know what he's looking at yet, but this idea that, they've been sitting there for a little bit. Wolf looks out the window to indicate they've actually been waiting for something, to happen. And he's obviously looking over at the bank. And it just gives you a little bit of an indication like, all right, it's time to go, and that there's something else we're hoping to go do. And here you can see Wolf is walking. So again, this was one of those cases where I just wanted to shoot reference. I didn't want to worry about walking. I just wanted to work on the acting. You know what I mean? I wanted to work out, what would be the best acting, for this particular moment. So that's why you see me get up from my couch and I kind of just act out from here. Something else that was interesting was that with Wolf, when we were studying his character, we were trying to figure out different mannerisms or how could he hold himself differently than other characters. And obviously his suit is a very obvious prop that he has. And, if we were trying to figure out how often would he because typically you're like, oh yeah, I could adjust my suit. You know what I mean? I could correct myself. It's a little bit of business that you could do, especially in animation. You want to actually animate things and you want to move things around. So it's hard to keep, the character still, but I wanted to play with his suit, but not too much. So we had to pick specific moments. So I thought it made the most sense when he stood up from the table, to adjust his jacket. Cause that makes sense, right? I mean, I know you've got a jacket on now. I'm imagining, when you get up, you'll probably adjust a little bit, because the jacket probably, yeah, exactly. The jacket probably rides up a little bit or it's not quite right. And then this was another idea where I liked this idea of, him also adjusting his pants. So I was fortunate enough to get I was able to talk to CFX because I didn't have any control over it in animation, but I kind of told CFX this is what I'm going for. I want him to feel like he's trying to pull up his pants just to make sure they're not, totally down. And thankfully they were able to add in, the motion of the shirt and the pants, so that he could pull it up. And I just kind of faked it, with my animation. And what's interesting about this shot as well is that this reminds me of Sam Rockwell. He was the voice of Wolf. We spoke to him a few times about Wolf's character and what kind of swagger should he have, and could he be any, what kind of fun things could we do with his motion and the way he fills a room. And it was actually Sam's idea to have him hop up on the counter. Sam actually had even more ideas, what if he actually got up on top of the counter, but I don't think there was enough time, or it seemed maybe a little bit excessive. But it was cool to kind of chat with him about some of the swagger of Wolf and different acting choices. Here's another, for instance, if you look at my top reference here, my initial reference was you just open up your jacket, he takes out the money and leaves it on the table, and that's it. But Pierre wanted this idea because the idea is that you still want to like Wolf. So Pierre came up with the idea of giving a tip, as well. So he also leaves, some money for a tip. And so that's why I had to, you can see on the bottom reference, I had to shoot another take where, I place the money down and then I reach in for the tip and then leave the tip. This is one of those cases where I didn't actually take anything out of my pocket because every time I tried to act it out, I never grabbed the money at the right time. I just wasn't as smooth as Wolf. You know what I mean? So it's one of those where it's you just pretend, to grab money. So you can see in my reference, there's nothing actually in my hand on the bottom here, Also with this bottom take, I added this little, again, this was, I think, kind of a Sam Rockwellism, where there's this little thing here I do where I raise my hands. If you watch the bottom reference here, I raise my hands and then I do this little point sort of thing. And then you can see, obviously, I put that into Wolf here, this little point idea. And that was a little bit of an inspiration from Sam Rockwell. I think there was a film where he had done something sort of similar, or there's some discussion that we had. But that was one of those cases where, it just adds a little bit of flair to Wolf, adds a little bit of personality. He's it seemed very much I don't know, an extra flourishy sort of thing. Wolf, one of the things we decided with Wolf was that part of his mask that he wears, this cool guy, this George Clooney type character, is that he's also does stuff a little bit flashier than he needs to. You know what I mean? He even if we go back to how he holds the money, here you can see he's got you know, the fingers, you know, sort of splayed, so it feels a little bit fancy, right? And then similarly, like when he releases that money, he's got it kind of in a cool way, like between his two fingers, you know, kind of dropping it. Like he always does things just a little bit fancier or a little bit more flourishy than normal. This was a small thing here in my reference where with Wolf, I held this smile or this sort of idea. And part of it was because I liked the idea of just showing his teeth, because even though Wolf, I think, is, you know, an appealing character and he seems very likable, I did want to show that, kind of like in little places, show the teeth just a little bit more to remind you that like he is still a wolf or he is still dangerous. It's just a little thing here, and I don't know if it can necessarily communicates that way, but every once in a while, I'd like to just show a little bit of teeth for him, just in case, you know. And again, here, you can still see some of my references still pretty close, you know, to what ended up in the final product, you know. Here you can see it's Christmas time when I was shooting this reference. But this is one of those cases where, you know, I liked the idea of him, you know, going like, I'm cutting him off, you know, sort of thing. But I needed the physicality to match a little bit better what I was going to do in the final shot here. And also Min and I, the original idea, you can see up on the top left here, the original idea was that Wolf was going to open up the door and kind of usher Snake through the door. But instead, Min came up with this great idea with Snake, where you can't see Snake in here, but like, what if they both went back to the door, looked at each other, and we were like, you ready to do this? All right, we're ready to do this. And it created this nice little button at the end of this diner scene. So I had to go shoot reference again of that part where they kind of like head nod to each other right before they go through the door. And then I like this idea of Wolf using, you know, again, trying to be kind of like smooth or cool. He's using his butt or his hips, you know, to get himself through the door. There's a small Easter egg here where, because this shot is incredibly long, as this comes across, there's actually a cut here. You don't see it because obviously the thing goes across.
Yes.
But there were a couple things that happened. We needed to get, just from a practical standpoint, this is a long way to walk, like to go from the diner all the way across to the bank. Yeah. It was such a long way that I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to have to we got to do something here with the camera. So that first cut, so basically, let's see here. This is a little behind the scenes here. So it's hard to tell from this angle, but like he's kind of close to our side of the road. By the time this passes, he's a little bit further. So I've cheated him a little bit across the road. And then what we needed to get, like, before we go, like you can see, it's hard to tell from this perspective, but this is a long way to walk here across the road. So what we decided was, what if the camera lost them for a second, you know, and it looked up at the bank? And so what's hard to tell here is the camera all of a sudden speeds up. Like you can see that parking sign. They did a really good job. Like the parking sign, you know, moves forward, but the camera, like we adjusted the focal length and the distance of the camera so far, so that by the time you look back down, now they're almost at the steps of it. So that was like a cheat. Like there was no way that was going to work out, you know, to get them there. So we did cheat them forward here, which was cool. Then again, here you can see I'm kind of matching my reference pretty closely. This was something I didn't do in my reference that I actually added to my animation, was when Wolf turns here and looks at Snake, I have his brows come up just a little bit ahead of time to show just a little bit of thought before he speaks. So that's, you know, it's little things like that you end up adding just to kind of go like, this helps it feel a little bit more believable. I still like the idea of him just doing that little head accent, but just adding a little bit of brows before gave it a little bit more thought. Before. Here you can see in my reference, as I run up the stairs, I sped this up. This is one of those cases where I wanted a little bit more pep to Wolf's step, you know. And here in this is a good example of stylization that we would do from a bad guy's perspective. So like you can see, I tried to hold the up positions for Wolf. So you can see he's here, and then there's a big frame, a big spacing jump from here to here. but then you can see that his spacing stays pretty close up at the top of his arc, which speeds up. And then there's a bigger down, you know, for the down. And then he stays down there. And again, another big spacing jump to the up. And another big spacing jump for the down here. And again, up, hold, then down, you know, and it creates this feeling of like, you know what I mean? Like it's, I don't know if you can see me. I don't know if you can see my camera, if it's only screen sharing. But it created this something that we did in Bad Guys a lot. We didn't use a lot of spacing for in-betweens. You would start at one extreme, maybe ease out of that one extreme, and then pop to the next. So like if you watch his foot down here, you know, you've got this silhouette from the back, and then you pop to the other side of the foot so that you can favor that extreme. Because like you like this pose of the foot, and you don't want to spend any time on this in between. You just want to go from like an appealing clear silhouette here to another appealing clear silhouette here. Here I added just a fun little hop with Wolf. I thought it added a little bit of energy, but it's not necessarily in my reference, you know, there. Again, he's adjusting his jacket, you know, just trying to find those times when, you know, adjusting the jacket made sense and it didn't feel like it was gratuitous. Something interesting on like his mouth shapes here, you can see, to keep things appealing, you'd see that Wolf has this kind of mouth shape here. There'd be a little bit of an ease out, but then I'd go from this shape to, there'd be like a little bit of an in-between or a favor, but then it would pop to this shape. And that's kind of like one of the defining styles of Bad Guys, is that we would, again, go from those extremes and try to ease out a little bit, but then pop to the next extreme. And that even went for the mouth, you know, so there is a little bit of an in-between here, but then we tried to get it out wide, you know, in his mouth. And you can see this case here where he opens up the door for him. That was my original idea at the previous door. And so we just used that idea here, you know, where he opens up the door for Wolf, for Snake. And if you have any questions as I'm talking, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going on about this. Hopefully this is helpful.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to know, like, the thing you showed, like that cheating for the camera thing, like they cannot walk to the door in that much amount of time.
Right.
And you cheated like animating the camera towards that. So is that thing like, do you have that kind of freedom, or is it locked in the layout as well, like in the storyboarding? Like, is this something done in the storyboarding, or you have done it on your own just to make sure that they reach the place where they want to reach?
Well, they had layout initially had the camera not panning up. They initially had the camera just following the characters all the way across the street. So the camera never went up like this.
Okay.
And when we opened up the scene, both Min and I were like, we could not, like, they had to travel too far, so their legs were going to have to be too wide, and they'd have to walk too fast, and it just was not going to work. So we ended up talking to layout, going like, this is impossible for us to get across the street, so we got to figure something out. And so we sat down and we brainstormed with Pierre, our director. And that's where we came up with this idea of like, maybe the camera pans up for a second to see the bank. And we did have to have a good amount of back and forth to get the timing to work out, you know, of like, how long does the camera look up at the bank, and how far forward does the camera have to come to then make it feel believable, like we're only taking a few realistic steps towards the staircase here. So it was definitely a lot of back and forth. In animation, we do have the ability to make our own cameras if we want to. Like, we can take the animation from the existing shot cam and we can put it onto a thing called an anim cam, and we can adjust the curves from there. But in this case, like, I might have mocked something up. Like, I might have quickly mocked the camera coming up and then coming back down, but then I gave it back to layout to make the final, you know, camera. But again, there was some back and forth until we got the camera to work out, you know, just right. You can also see here, again, the timing works out pretty closely. And then And then you can see at the end here, I don't have anywhere to walk. Like I take a step and then I'm like, I'm going to hit my table. So I just stop. But so that's where, you know, animation then takes over sort of thing. Here's another case of the spacing. Like if you watch Wolf's hand. So if you watch Wolf's arm, I pop from this downward angle, which is a nice clear read, to this upward arm bend. Again, just trying to make sure that every pose is reading clearly. And then it kind of gets into this pose and you see how it kind of sticks with that arm, you know, and then again, there's a little bit of a favor out for here, but then it pops to where it's supposed to be. And then it goes. And so from here, then all of this afterwards is just kind of animating. I did a few, I watched a bunch of anime. I watched a bunch of like Lupin the Third. I watched a bunch of other films. And that's where kind of like what we were talking about before, like how I got inspiration for like these poses of Wolf, you know, as he's running through, you know, trying to just get this clear read of it's difficult because it's like he runs by so quickly, you know what I mean? But it was something where it's like you've got this big pillar here, you got another pillar in the middle and another pillar in the middle, and you really want to make sure your pose reads clearly. So I didn't want any of this getting cut off, you know, over the middle bar. So you can see that's where he has his down position. And then when he's up again, he's like framed nicely in the middle of this. Again, so that you kind of read that you get the idea that he's reading, that he's running. And then here was just a straight ripoff from like Lupin the Third for like this pose. We had a back and forth. Like I think Wolf had both legs in front of him. I think Wolf was also like more Supermaning out. Like we had a bunch of different ideas that were kind of like that, but we ended up feeling like since we grabbed a lot of inspiration from Lupin, we might as well do kind of like a Lupin take here. So also Jorge Capote, I don't know if you've seen him on Twitter, but he really helped with a lot of the designs for Wolf and a lot of the animation style, and he helped me with this pose as well. He did like an initial draw over, and then I made it work in 3D. So then again, this was a case where we worked with CFX to make sure that the cape or the jacket felt like a cape, you know, sort of shape, and that everything was folding just the way we wanted it to. So yeah. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. I think I totally went off on a tangent from like what you had originally asked. So I don't know if this is what you had asked for, Naresh, but
like quite a long shot this is.
Yeah. It was one of those where again we had to figure out between Min and I, you know, when one character starts acting, the other one stays a little bit more still, so that we had a good, you know, you could direct your eye nicely.
Yes.
And then the whole idea where it's like, yeah, you're at this table for, I don't know, as I scrub, like they're sitting down talking at this table before they get up. It's about a little over a minute. So, you know, when you're sitting there, you're thinking to yourself, you're like, oh man, how am I going to make this interesting? You know what I mean? Like, how am I going to make, first of all, it was a dream to do a long shot like this. It took us about 4 months or so, I think, because Min did Snake and I did Wolf. And then we had other animators help us out with the background characters, like the people who were afraid, and you know the girl who comes out of the back room there.
So it is not like if you are given a shot, then you have to animate the whole thing. Like now you animated only the Wolf character, and the background stuff is done by somebody else, and the other character Snake is done by someone else.
Yes. Yep.
Is it what like you decide this, or it is given from the production?
Pretty much production had decided on this, because I think for one person to do this entire shot, I just would have taken forever. You know?
Yes.
And I was the lead on Wolf. So like I knew his character the best, and I knew how to animate him, you know, the best. And Min is the lead on Snake. So like Min knew how to animate him, you know, perfectly. And we have crowds animators, and crowds animators, like I think we had a crowd animator take care of the main crowds of people. So like these people, the people who were initially afraid, Where is it? People who are afraid in the back here. And then I think we had a couple of other animators animate, people behind the counter. The people that would like this guy in the window and different people that would show up. But we typically have crowd animators who would animate these background characters. They usually animate cycles of the characters, but we needed them to animate specifically, for this shot. And the same goes for like when they go outside. Like we had one animator who was in charge of these cars. Because Min and I animated Wolf and Snake, and then the other animators came in and animated to them, to the timing that we had. I think I animated this bus going by because we needed to hook up that timing between the two shots here. But you can see the crowds animators, like they had a blast with these characters in the background. You know what I mean? Like I love this guy here, where over a frame or two, he pops into this like crazy fun, like anime sort of run. And then like you got the guy sitting at the bench here where like one's really focused on his phone and his buddy just like, no, he picks him up and like runs away. And there's a lot of like fun little Easter eggs, like this guy in the back here, how he just like dives off into the bushes, Meanwhile, there's this girl that's still taking a selfie. So it was great because like the for the crowds animators to hero some of these characters, you could tell that they had a lot of fun. Having them react to the animation that we had done. So yeah. So there's a number of people who helped, who helped get this through.
A lot of context behind doing what you do, like
yeah,
specific reason for everything you did.
Yep. And that's why sorry, go for it, Naresh. Sorry.
Yes, like nothing you did on your own, just thinking about it. Like you have planned everything like that. Here he will be doing this action here, and you have connected all the things like why is he doing this kind of action at this point of time.
Yeah.
So, for conveying the message, whatever the message is. So every action is been planned.
Yes.
That's what I got to know from this whole team.
Yes. And that to me is something that's really, really important. And part of the reason why I shoot reference, I shoot so much reference and I do so much planning is because I want every decision that I'm making in my animation to have a reason for it. You know what I mean? Here's another fun little tidbit, like, let's see. So here, Wolf is like teasing Snake and he reaches over. It was, again, something interesting because we wanted the two characters to be able to like, we didn't want them to feel like one was sitting at one side of the table and one was sitting at the other side of the table and they never interacted. We wanted to make it feel like they were in that same world together doing stuff. So one of the things we did was like, what if, Wolf grabbed the sugar, and gave it to Snake. And then that way Snake could grab it and pour it into his coffee. And it just was it made it feel like they were in that same world together, or they were, they were interacting with each other. Something that was interesting was that Pierre, the director, again, asked me, like, I liked initially that Wolf stayed looking at Snake there while he was teasing him. And I wanted to keep Wolf in this pose because my intent was like, he's just sitting there teasing me. He's like, what's more, what's better than cake, sort of thing. But Pierre was like, I want to get an indication that Wolf is thinking about Snake. Like Wolf is anticipating Snake's needs because they know each other so well. And so Pierre wanted this quick look over. So that's what Wolf does. He quickly looks over at the sugar, there. And then he reacts again to Snake. And then that way he can immediately start reaching and looking over for the sugar because he already saw where it was. Like he clocked where it was. And then again, this was one of those things. Snake didn't have to ask for the sugar. Like Wolf anticipated that Snake needed it, for his coffee. And so it's just little things like that where we're adding like these little details to give you an idea that they're not only comfortable in their environment, but they're very comfortable with each other, and that they've known each other for a while.
So this is everything planned by the animator, like what will happen. This is not something added in the storyboard or something.
No. In fact, I mean, there were some things that were, I think, in the original storyboards, like this idea of Wolf looking up and going like air, like up in the air. I think it was Mike Surrey who amazing animator. I think, but he also storyboarded, I think, this scene. I think he had this idea in his storyboards, if I recall, this idea of like looking up at the air. So I think that idea came from there. Obviously, I shot the reference, so I got the specific timing, but that came from the ref. I'm trying to think of what else came from the ref. Like this leaning on the other side of the table. I don't think that was in the storyboards. Yeah, most of this came from us. I loved, this was one of my favorite parts where like Wolf leans across the table. This is another one of those cases where like, again, you can see how closely it kind of follows my reference here. But I love this idea where he's like, Wolf is, it plays out perfectly where like Wolf is staring at him, trying to like kind of goad him on, but it also worked out perfectly for the animation where Wolf then becomes more still, and then your eye will go back to Snake, who becomes more active, you know what I mean? But it also fits how Wolf feels and what he's trying to convey. So it kind of like some of those things, you're looking for opportunities to get things to work out both acting wise, but also mechanically, if that makes sense. Something really quickly that I can point out as well is that with the hand poses, I tried to make sure that all the hand poses were interesting or different. So like if I look at, so Wolf does that, and then when he places his hands down, like you've got one hand that's on the edge of the table and the other is more of like a fist, you know, sort of thing. It creates a little bit more visual interest there. And then later on, let's see here if I can scrub forward. Yeah, and then when the hand comes down on the table, like it's a little bit flatter here, and then it's a little bit off the table, and then he's in a fist shape. And then if I go a little bit later, let's see, as he's moving across the table, again, I got this flat shape, but then I do two different shapes, right? So like I've got the hand being flat here, and then the next time it adjusts, the hand comes off and then is in like a flatter, like fist sort of shape. You know, and then I can go to this. So it's just trying to find ways to like keep things a little bit more interesting. And again, when his hand comes down onto the table here, it's more of like a relaxed sort of fist, which again, I don't think we had seen, you know, before this moment. And again, when this hand comes back down, you know, it's again got the fist here and then one that's a little bit more flat. And then I pulled up that back index finger to create a little bit more visual interest so that the hand wasn't just like a flat L shape on the end. It just created a little bit more appeal, you know, to it. So, you know, stuff like that, where you're always looking for like a little bit of interest, a little bit of contrast.
These things are added gradually. Like when you get the thought, you think about it like maybe I should add this, or maybe I should add this thing. So this is not at the level of blocking, right?
Right. Yeah, the level of blocking, I'm probably I have general hand poses, but for blocking, I'm just kind of worried about more the timing and the general placement of the arms. But for details like that, you know, in terms of like the actual hand pose itself, that will come later, you know, for sure. This is kind of like a fun little technical thing. Like I had this loop on like the mug, and I had to sort of like cheat it. I had to cheat it like inside of his hand so that I could get this read, because otherwise the handle was going to be out here and he was going to have to like penetrate through it. So I had to sort of like cheat it a little bit there. And then again, in animation, this is something that comes later, but I think it makes a difference. But like, for instance, Wolf does this little tap with the glass, and it's kind of like this symbolizing of like, cool, we're done. Like it's almost like he's stamping the end of that moment. And then again, a little thing here that comes later is now when he removes his hand from the mug, it rotates the mug back. You see how it like rotates just a little bit as his hand comes off of it. I don't know. It's little things like that that I think really help finish something, you know, to make it feel like they're in this world and they're actually interacting with these things. Because, you know, in CG, right, things can pass through each other, you know, very easily. But adding little details like that, I think, help make it feel like they're actually in the world. Yeah. So yeah.
That's great. Like getting into so much details Like I got to know so many things about the minute details.
Awesome. Yeah, because that's kind of what it comes down to at the end, right? Like is putting in all these little things to really, but that's why I focus in blocking on making sure the acting intent is right, and making sure that my acting beats and my timing are working, because I know then after that everything else is like gravy. You know what I mean? Like as long as the acting and the intent is working, making the poses look nicer, adding asymmetry and interesting timing and your shapes and your silhouettes. Like for me, I'm like, you can always get that in after and make it look just like super great. But all the audience I feel like cares about for the most part is, do they connect with the character and do they believe the character, so that's why I start there. I'm like, give me something believable first, and then we'll make it look pretty. Again, that's my philosophy. And I think it means sometimes that sometimes I think my poses don't look as good, and sometimes my timing isn't as like entertaining as it could be, but I'm okay sacrificing some of that because I think the performance is believable, but I think every animator kind of has their things they care most about, right? Like everybody kind of has, like, some animators really love posing and timing, and you can look at that in their animation. Like, not to say that they don't have believable acting, I'm sure they do, but you can see that they tend more towards appealing mechanics and that sort of thing, and which is great. But I think everybody's got stuff that they care most about, and I think their workflow usually reflects what they care most about, right? Like my workflow starts with a believable performance, you know what I mean? Whereas I think some people do a lot more posing or thumbnailing, and they work on getting an appealing pose or a shape, that fits the acting, but they start from the shape, and then get to the acting. So anyway, it's just a different way to approach it.
This is what I came to know. Like this is the thing that should be taught to the students or whoever is coming to the animation field. Not about this technical how to do animation, but more about the context, what to do in animation.
Yep.
That
Absolutely.
is the thing, yes, because that will enhance the shot or whatever animation we are doing, having the context and understanding what the character will do.
Yes. And I think what's hard about animation, well, animation in general is just difficult. You know what I mean? It's a difficult, like there's so much that you need to know, between the software, how to use the software, to understanding body mechanics, right? And you have to be a good actor. You also have to understand good composition. You have to understand, there's so much to know. And but I think always keeping in mind the point of what it is that you're animating, or the goal. Like, what is the goal? The goal is to make the audience feel like this character is sad, or the goal is to convey this certain message. It's always good to keep that in your mind, because especially when you're learning, right? Because when you're learning a lot of rules, and you're trying to like do this and don't do that, and this is better than that, and also you're just trying to get better at it yourself, and so it makes sense that so much emphasis gets put on mechanics and silhouette and posing, because it's very difficult and there's a lot to learn. But I think it always helps to make sure that you're always shooting for an intent. You're always shooting to convey something in particular, because I think most people agree that that's the ultimate intent, the ultimate goal of animation is to communicate something, right? Or to communicate an idea or an emotion. And something can be pretty from a motion perspective, and that's fine. That has value, but I find animation to be so much more meaningful when it's like, I would rather see a piece of animation that is beautifully acted, but maybe not mechanically perfect, than something that's mechanically perfect, but is kind of devoid of emotion, if that makes sense. I'm probably putting too much judgment on it, but like, that's what I would prefer. I prefer to see a believable performance that is not as pretty as it could be, but I connect with the character. Something rather than something that's empty but beautiful. So
this is the thing I even asked Prashant as well. Like, how do you guys put so many details into animation. But
Yeah.
now today I got to know that yes, this is how it is. Like the way you explained about those minute details, and you add it on the later stage.
Yeah.
Like you might not be even thinking about those things at the earlier stage.
Yes.
Gradually, when you do the shot, then you might get an idea that maybe I should do this at this point of time.
Yes.
And like, is it preferable to even change the main poses, or we have to lock the main poses, everything at the blocking stage, and then the details we can add on like later on?
Yeah, I think, I mean, like I said, people approach it differently. Like some people who do, like people who do more stepped blocking might put in more details at the beginning. But I guess in my mind, the whole point of blocking is just to communicate an idea. Like if you, as long as you can communicate what your intent is,
Yes.
like that's good enough, you know? Um, yeah, and then you can always come back to those details later. I think it's a personally, I think it's a better way to go just because again, there's so much to think about. There's so much to,
Yes.
you know, put into your animation that
Yes.
I think it's just best to make sure that your base, like the core of what it is that you're trying to tell and what you're trying to do is working up front. And then everything from there should only go towards strengthening that idea, you know, as long as that core idea is good. I don't think you're going to have a good time if your core idea isn't good, but you're trying to fix that as you're animating through. Like I think it's best to try your best to start, you know, in a
Is
good
what
place.
happens at the beginning, like majorly. We try to do it and we try to animate it correctly, but we don't think about what should I animate, like how
Yes,
the character will have the performance delivered. So
yes,
rather than thinking about the performance, generally we think most about the animation part, like how
yep,
smooth is it or
yes,
how beautiful it is.
yeah, yeah. And I think especially for people who are just starting out in animation or a little bit more junior, like I understand it because it's again it's so difficult and you're trying to move the character well, you know what I mean, like you're trying to just get it
Yes.
to look nice, which is hard enough, but so I get how the focus sometimes will start to lean towards mechanics and a little bit away from the performance, but um, that's what I try to tell students a lot of times is just always have at least like one eye on, you know, have a clear intent that you're going for. You know what I mean? At least shoot for something, you know, or an emotion or a performance of some sort. You know, shoot for a goal. And if it's a test that's just purely for mechanics and that sort of thing, like that's cool. Like that's fine as well. But when you're doing like an acting shot, it's good to have like just make sure you've got a good clear intent, you know, to begin with what you're going for.
Like
You know?
if you want to get into this career or in the production studio as a beginner,
Yeah.
so we might have to, like, that is a compulsion, like we should have a showreel or a demo reel.
Yeah.
So what would you like to add on in the demo reel part, like what kind of a showreel should it be, or what kind of shots the students should put or animate?
So kind of extending on that point, like I think for DreamWorks especially, what helps to see on a reel is work that mimics closely to what it is that we do, you know, typically day to day. So like for instance, if you're going to go work at a gaming studio that is focusing more on cycles or like characters that need to fight and that sort of thing, like you should make sure you have some cycles on your reel and some body mechanics that show fighting, you know, on your reel. And similar with DreamWorks, that maybe doesn't work quite as well for DreamWorks, only because that's not what we typically do day to day. You know, like usually we have characters talking to each other or characters emoting, or um, we do like to see obviously good mechanics, you know, in your animation, but to the point that we had just talked about, like especially if you're a little bit more junior, we don't necessarily need your mechanics to be like perfect because we feel like you can learn to get better at mechanics. You know what I mean? Like what we want to see is that you're like, do you have an ability to show a believable performance or have show believable emotion, or do you understand that kind of like subtlety? And like I said, if there are some elbow pops here and there, or if the spacing isn't 100% perfect, or the silhouette isn't super perfect, like especially if you're a little bit more junior, I think we will still accept someone like that, because we'll kind of go like, but their performance was great. Like the performance of the character was really good, and I believed it. The rest of the mechanics and the silhouette stuff, like we've got plenty of people here who are really great at that, who can help people through, getting those mechanics to look right and to feel right. So like I said, I would always lean, especially if you're working on a demo reel, I would lean more towards trying to portray believable performances. But that's not to say that you shouldn't have stuff on your reel that shows that you can do mechanics well. So for instance, if you want to show that you can lift something heavy, like you can show that you can pick up something heavy or pick up something light, and you can show the difference between those two things, I think that's great to do. I would also just frame that exercise in some kind of context. So like I would put it like some guy's hard at work, on a construction site, and he's having to do some stuff. Put him in a scene, you know what I mean? Put him in a certain emotional state, so that we can not only see the mechanics you can do that are good, but we can show that you can tell a story, or that you can convey an emotion. Does that make sense? Yes. So I would always put it in some kind of context of some sort, instead of just having a character walk into a scene, grab something, pick it up, and then take it out. We'd like to see maybe a little story, or a little like, why is the character doing what they're doing, or how do they feel about what it is that they're doing? We want to see that, as well.
Anything else you would like to add up, like which would help the freshers or the beginners in their animation career?
The only thing I would say is this, especially if they're trying to get into feature film, if that's the goal, or to get into animating as a career, my biggest piece of advice would be is make yourself as lucky as possible. And I think what I mean by that is, like we had talked about earlier, study the world around you, study film, study animation, study how animals move. Maybe you have a partner, like study how your partner's mannerisms are different than your own. And also take the time to feel things. So like when you watch stuff, see how it makes you feel. Maybe think about why it made you feel that way. Like, what was it about that film or that scene or that performance that made you feel a particular way? Study that stuff. And then also with animation, you're only going to get better by repetition, right? By animating stuff. Like you gotta, stay in it and animate, try different things, and seek out feedback from people. There are a lot of industry professionals, myself included, that don't mind giving feedback, and in fact look forward to doing that, because we're so passionate about this thing, and we want to share the love. We want to be able to help others and that sort of thing. So and then just apply everywhere. Like the worst they're going to say is no. You know what I mean? Like if you apply somewhere, it's not like they're going to blacklist you because they're like, oh, we didn't like their reel, and they're just going to go like, nope, not this time. So it's like, and that's fine. Like that doesn't cost you anything, and just keep working at stuff, and keep moving forward. And because the truth is, and I don't think a lot of people like to talk about it, but the truth is that luck is just a really big factor, not just in this industry, but in life, in general, where, I was fortunate enough that DreamWorks was offering this outreach program, right? And I went to work at, I was rejected by all the major studios. And then I went to work at this commercial company, and one of the guys there happened to have a friend who worked at DreamWorks who passed my reel onto them, that sort of thing. But if I didn't continue to try to pursue my career, I wouldn't have gone to work at that place. And if I didn't do a good job at what I was doing, then my friend wouldn't have recommended me, sort of thing. And so, like, I don't know, like, for instance, DreamWorks, they just hired people recently at the beginning of this year, but sometimes we'll go years without hiring people, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you might be ready to go, but DreamWorks is not hiring. So it's like, what do? You know what I mean? It's like, well, then you got to keep going. So it's just getting yourself ready so that when your number is called, when DreamWorks finally calls, or when Pixar calls, or whoever, that you have a reel ready to go. You know what I mean? And you're ready to like send their way, you're ready to be there in the interview, and you're ready to talk about animation, and you're ready to animate, you know, when the time comes. And I think, you know, just accepting that luck is a big factor, but the more you're prepared, the more you're ready, the luckier you'll be, you know, when that time comes and an opportunity does come, you know. But it's hard. It's hard in animation, you know, especially to make it into feature. It's there are a lot of people vying for just a few spots, you know. And, you know, the other piece of advice I guess I would give is kind of similar to what I did at the beginning of my career before I got into DreamWorks. Was I tried my best to gear my careers to do the type of work that I wanted to do. So like I could have done motion capture and I could have done other things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I had an opportunity to do like keyframe animation at this one place. And I was like, that's more of like what I would like to do. So I was like, even though I'm so about working there, at least it's the job is doing what I want to do. So like, you know, you kind of keep gearing yourself to like doing the things that you want to do, so that hopefully it eventually leads you, you know, to that place. If you don't have that luxury, then at least getting a job in animation is going to be better than not having a job in animation. You know what I mean? Like even if it's working on mocap, at least you're looking at motion every day and you're adjusting curves and you're thinking about animation. Like that will still help, you know, help train you and get you where you need to go. So
is it like what kind of softwares? Like, is it Maya only you use or some additional softwares as well?
I mean, at DreamWorks, we use Primo, which is a proprietary piece of software, but most of the industry uses Maya and software kind of like that. And every software has their own quirks and differences, but you can learn. Like when people come to DreamWorks, they have to learn Primo. Like nobody can use Primo outside of DreamWorks. So it's like there's always a learning curve when you come in. So, but when you use Maya, there's a lot of very similar aspects to Maya, you know, that are in Primo and in other 3D software. So I don't know how much it matters which, you know, whether you use Blender or whatever. I don't think it matters a ton.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We can learn those things very fast. Like if we know what we want to do, like be good at conveying the performance, not at the software.
Yes. Exactly. And that's why I just recommend, you know, watching stuff and becoming a real student and like lover of the craft. You know what I mean? Like really, yeah, just read what you can, watch what you can. I used to watch a bunch of workflows from, you know, other other animators, just see how they do things, you know. Maybe you can take one of their parts of their workflow or you know, like I've got this reference reel that I was showing you for Bad Guys. Like watch reference reels, because I know people have put those online, like see how people do what they do. And again, don't ever feel like you need to do it exactly like they do it. But a lot of times there'll be some part of their workflow that will resonate with you, that you'll be like, oh, maybe I'm going to try that, or maybe I'm going to do that, you know, because I've got a different workflow and I know everybody else at DreamWorks, they've all got slightly different workflows and different ways that they do things. And just feel free to like explore and find, and your workflow will like change over time. You know what I mean? Like something will make sense or something will work better. And, you know, but it'll be unique to you and it'll have strengths and weaknesses, but it'll be what makes most sense to you. And I think the more you animate, the more you discover that workflow, or the more you discover how you'd like to work. And I think that's okay. I think that's good to embrace that, you know. So
thank you so much for your time. I'm really grateful about this. Whatever I'm learning this from you, just by talking to you, I've figured out like so many things.
Oh, great.
I used to think like how to add those details, but not technically. Now I got to know that how you add those details, and it's always about context.
Yes. I think it's best to I like to have a reason for, you know, because in animation, you're spending so much time working on each frame. Like you have the ability to make sure that each frame, you know, means something or is communicating something. You know, every choice you make is a chance to tell a story, right? And especially in animation. So so that's what I try to think about as I'm doing it. So yeah, this was great, Naresh. Thank you
so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful, and I'm really blessed that I got this opportunity to like talk to you and discuss these things. And thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
and sharing your thoughts. And maybe in future as well, we could talk about something else into animation.
Absolutely, absolutely. If anything, if any of the things that I said today spark any ideas or thoughts or things that we want to get into more, like we want to talk more about reference and how we shoot reference, or we want to talk more about posing or whatever, like I'm totally down. I know it took a little time to like set up this meeting,
Yes, yes.
but I would love to come back and talk more. I still love talking about animation. So so this is great.
So thank you
Awesome.
so much. And it's been morning there, right?
Yes, yes, yeah. I'm about to go have some lunch. Actually, it's now about noon time. Yeah, it's late for you though, right?
Yeah, it's almost midnight.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
As I got to like, it's been quite a while. I've been chasing you, so I thought like maybe I should. Already, I did not sleep since last 2 days because I was doing a freelance. So like today also, I'm just like so much sleepy, but I thought that like, let's continue this talk and
Yes,
let's finish this thing first because
yes,
as it's been quite a long time and you have planned your day,
yes,
so I didn't want to miss this opportunity.
yeah. Well, thank you, Naresh. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and let me know if you want to chat again, and we'll do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you
All right,
so much,
of
and
course.
we'll meet soon.
All right, sounds good.
All
See
right.
you, Naresh.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
Take care.